Pirates, privateers, and buccaneers. When we think of them, we tend to associate their antics with the Caribbean. But the golden age of piracy had a second epicenter, less celebrated but no less fascinating: the islands of the southwestern Indian Ocean. Between the 17th and 18th centuries, pirates from around the world terrorized the convoys of European East India companies as well as the vessels of the Mughal Empire. Their main base of operations was a tiny island off the eastern shore of Madagascar, known to the French as Saint-Marie, and to the Malagasy locals as Nosy Boraha. This was the final home for many of these pirates. Dozens of them were laid to rest in what may be the only surviving pirate cemetery in the world. Today we're going to take a walk amongst those graveyards and explore the epic tales of the pirates of Nosy Boraha. But we're going to hear about how a few hundred raiders severely disrupted trade to India, how they founded a utopian republic in Madagascar, and how they mingled with Malagasy aristocracy, spawning royal lineages. And we certainly won't forget that time when they talked the King of Sweden into colonizing Africa. But enough talk, off to Madagascar. Nosy Boraha, or Isle Saint-Marie, is only 222 square kilometers in surface area and is located 7 kilometers off the northeastern coast of mainland Madagascar. Today it can be reached by boat or plane, flying from the capital city of Antananarivo to the Saint-Marie airport, 13 kilometers south of Nosy Boraha's main town, Ambodifatatra. The island is full of natural attractions. Everything you want from a tropical paradise is here: sandy beaches, clear waters, luscious vegetation, and the prices are quite affordable too compared to other tourist sites in Madagascar, like the island of Nosy. If you're lucky enough to land in Saint-Marie, though, take an hour of your time to visit the small cemetery of Saint-Pierre, better known as the Cemetery of Pirates. It is scenically located on the shores of the bay, just south of the main town, and it houses about 30 tombs of 18th century pirates, some engraved with a skull and crossbones. The cemetery used to be much larger, with several hundred graves, but recurring cyclones have exacted their toll on the tombstones over the decades. In addition to inclement weather, the graves of Saint-Pierre had to contend with treasure hunters. Widespread rumors tell of pirates buried with their treasures, or how some of the headstones are actually an entrance to secret passageways leading to well-hidden booty. According to the Madagascar Information Network magazine, these tunnels actually exist, but a faddy, a sort of local prohibition or taboo, forbids anyone from actually opening them. Other rumors concern the large black tomb of an unknown pirate who was buried in a sitting position as a punishment for his sins. The mysterious pirate is said to be the legendary Captain Kidd, guarding his treasure below ground. As we'll learn later, there is little chance that Captain Kidd's treasure is hidden on the island. As a matter of fact, there is very little chance that any pirate treasure is buried anywhere. There may have been a couple of cases of pirates hiding their valuables, but most times their gains were invested in what really mattered to them: booze, tobacco, gambling, and women. The rest was squandered, usually on better weapons and new ships. The pirates in Nosy Boraha are regularly needed to buy or steal new vessels, as proven by the presence of another cemetery, a ship graveyard in the shallow waters off Ambodifatatra Bay. In July of 2015, notorious treasure hunter Barry Clifford led an expedition to the ship graveyard. He was looking for Captain Kidd's ship, the Adventure Galley, and its corresponding treasure. Clifford was able to identify what he believed were the remains of the Adventure Galley, but he had no success in locating any valuables. Until one day, while he was scuba diving in the wreckage, a solid bar of metal weighing some 50 kilograms nearly fell on his head. Clifford announced that he had found a silver ingot, proof that Kidd's treasure had sunk with the Adventure Galley. Unfortunately for him, experts with UNESCO and other organizations disproved his claims. The silver turned out to be lead, and the ship he thought was the Adventure Galley may have been a broken down structure from the harbor. Based on this, the physical evidence of the pirate presence on Nosy Boraha may appear rather underwhelming. However, historical records prove that this was a bona fide capital of piracy in the Indian Ocean. Not just a sort of retirement village for old pirates as described by some sources, but the main base of operations for hundreds of very active raiders in their prime. It's time now to let those dusty bones rest in Saint-Pierre and hear about their tales of murder and ambition. The inhabitants of Madagascar, the Malagasy, were divided into several independent coastal states, the most powerful being the Saklava Kingdom on the western half of the island. The first Europeans to establish trade ties with the Malagasy were the Portuguese, followed by the Dutch, the English, and the French. They interacted mainly with the coastal states, who raided the inland, kidnapping and selling other fellow Malagasy into slavery. These powers also tried to establish permanent colonies on Madagascar, but their efforts were opposed by the Malagasy, frustrated by tropical diseases and harassed by pirates. That's right, wherever there is sea trade, pirates are sure to follow. In this case, Dutch pirates arrived in the early 1630s and pitched their bases in the secluded coves and islets off the Madagascar coast. The Dutch pirates were soon defeated by the combined efforts of the Dutch and English East India Companies, as well as the English Royal Navy. However, the void they left was soon filled by a second generation of scoundrels, Caribbean buccaneers who flocked in during the 1650s from their home island of Tortuga. And we actually have an episode on the Buccaneers of Tortuga if you want to learn more about that. When the Buccaneers of the Caribbean moved into the Indian Ocean, their favorite haunt became Nosy Boraha. This new base offered everything a sea dog could hope for to rest his salt-caked and scurvy-ridden bones. Crews could hide their ships in secluded coves. From there, they could easily launch raids against the convoys of the Dutch, English, and French East India Companies. Alternatively, they could harass the lavish vessels of the Mughal Empire, carrying pilgrims to Mecca or fabulous riches to the Red Sea. When returning from their raids, sailors could feast on delicious tropical fruit, drink locally brewed liquor, or trade with the Malagasy, who did not mind the presence of the pirates. Many of the Malagasy found it convenient to offer the pirates shelter and trade food and other goods with them. In exchange, they could receive firearms or military support in their campaigns against rival states. In some cases, pirates and locals got even friendlier. Mixed marriages were common, especially with the daughters of high-status local chiefs. The children of those unions were known to the Malagasy as Zena Malata, multiracial children who would grow up to wield considerable influence due to their aristocratic ancestry and access to the pirates' trade networks. At their height in 1705, the pirates of Madagascar numbered about 830 strong, but the headaches they caused were 1,000 times greater. French and Dutch colonies on Reunion and Mauritius were still too small and weak to offer any serious resistance, leaving the pirates free rein to plunder as much booty as they wanted. These pirate crews were well disciplined and organized. Their modus operandi more closely resembled an elite military unit than a ragtag gang of criminals. Their vessels were smaller than those of their prey, allowing for great speed and agility. The recurring tactic was to eliminate a target's ability to maneuver by immobilizing the ship's rudder, shooting down the helmsman, or targeting the main mast with accurate cannon fire. The crew would then jump aboard the enemy ship, unleashing a barrage of musket volleys and hand grenades. Finally, the pirates moved to close-quarters combat, slicing opponents with their cutlasses or stabbing them with improvised weapons such as marlinspikes. But what of the riches they stole? After the attack, captains divided the loot according to detailed contracts. Sometimes every man received an equal cut of the spoils regardless of rank. In other contracts, the captain and certain crew members, such as the surgeon, would keep a fixed salary, leaving the sailors to divide the rest. Well-organized crews saved a percentage of their gains into a common fund, which was used to invest in new weapons and vessels, or to buy food and supplies from locals. These violent men took everything they wanted by force on the high seas, but when on land, they were quite honest traders, honoring their deals with suppliers. Malagasy vendors and tradesmen were all too happy to be paid in pirate booty, particularly the common pirate-possessed luxury goods like gold, pearls, spices, and in some cases slaves. The locals, in turn, reinvested these goods by trading with European powers, thus stimulating commercial networks in the southwestern Indian Ocean and attracting the attention of colonial powers. The activities of Madagascar pirates attracted the attention of private entities too. At that time, a big business in North America was the mass kidnapping operation known as the transatlantic slave trade. In the 17th century, England's Royal African Company had a monopoly on all slaves brought to the American colonies. Dutch investors in New York, however, wanted a piece of the action too, and saw the Madagascar pirates as potential business partners. One notable investor was Frederick Philipse, who dispatched one of his agents, Adam Bulridge, to Nosy Boraha in 1691. His mission was to finance pirate crews so that they could supply Philipse with local slaves. The entrepreneurial Bulridge soon took to piracy himself, going as far as to sire sons with local aristocratic women. Bulridge grew confident and built a small fort to assert his dominion on the island, acting like an informal governor over Nosy Boraha. However, Bulridge may have bitten off more than he could chew. He neglected his original mission, sending too few slaves to Philipse back in New York. Moreover, his men took to raiding cattle from nearby Malagasy farms, angering the locals. Eventually, Bulridge's fort was overrun by a Malagasy attack, and the would-be king of the island had to flee back to New York. Following Baldridge's debacle, the residents of Nosy Boraha took a series of risky moves that ultimately angered the mighty European natives. Their attacks on the Mughal ships had long soured the relationship between that empire and the English East India Company, reaching a breaking point in the mid-1690s. In 1695, a pirate crew had viciously attacked a pilgrim vessel, killing or raping most passengers. The following year, legendary king of pirates Henry Avery had plundered two large and immensely rich Mughal vessels in the Arabian Sea. Mughal Emperor Alamgir I issued an ultimatum to the East India Company. If they did not get rid of pirates, they could forget about trading with them. In 1696, notorious privateer Captain William Kidd was dispatched from New York to get rid of the pirate scourge in Madagascar. However, Kidd and his financial backers in London were more interested in making a profit. He began his mission by simply stealing from other pirate crews and later turned against the very convoys he was meant to protect, the Mughals. Alamgir complained again, and this time the East India Company fleet and the Royal Navy intervened directly in 1698. The joint squadron targeted the heart of piracy in the Indian Ocean, Nosy Boraha. If the dashing officers of His Majesty William III were expecting glory in battle, they would be sorely disappointed. When they finally landed in Nosy Boraha, something curious happened. Only about 40 pirates lived on the island, demoralized and unwilling to fight. Perhaps because of Baldridge's activities, the Malagasy had almost completely cut off its trade with the sea rovers, denying them their supply network and making their lives extremely uncomfortable. The once proud pirates surrendered and boarded the Royal Navy's ships voluntarily, enticed by a blanket pardon issued by the Crown, a pardon that omitted Captain Kidd. Kidd was later arrested in Boston and executed in London in May of 1701. Despite the easy victory scored by the English, pirates soon reappeared in Nosy Boraha, targeting French convoys heading to Reunion and Mauritius. In hindsight, it's likely that the bulk of the raiders had sought temporary refuge with Malagasy allies in mainland Madagascar before returning to their old tricks. During the early 1700s, the first generation of Nosy Borahan scallywags was joined by a second influx, mainly of French origin. The French and English navies resumed efforts to crack down on this scourge, and many of the pirates, especially those of English and Scottish descent, started looking for an exit strategy. But to do so, they needed a formal pardon. In 1700, the Nosy Boraha pirates sent agents to England, France, and the Netherlands offering ships, money, even their own services in return for a pardon. Having suffered from the pirates, these nations declined. The last port of call was Sweden. The Swedes, under General King Charles XII, were involved in a long and expensive war with Russia and could do with all the ships and money that they could find. Pirate ambassador Captain Saint-Leger first approached the Swedes in May of 1714. His proposal landed on the desk of Count von Hopken, the Swedish Secretary of State. Saint-Leger was willing to buy a general pardon in exchange for £500,000 sterling. In today's money, that's more than £52 million or $71 million. The offer was already good, but the captain added a fleet of 25 ships and the services of 1,400 pirates to the bargain. However, Hopken found that Saint-Leger had no formal authority to negotiate, and so he sent him back to Nosy Boraha to receive an official appointment. Saint-Leger disappeared from history, never appearing again in any known public records or stories. His only relic was a young son who joined the Swedish ranks as a privateer. Some years later, the Swedes intercepted a letter from Nosy Boraha pirates offering a similar deal to the Danes. This time, Charles XII himself and his Minister of Finance, Count von Gortz, were seriously interested. In June 1718, two officially appointed agents of the Nosy Boraha pirates landed in Gothenburg, Caspar William Morgan and Jean Monnery. The two pirate captains talked business as equals with the king. This time, in return for Swedish protection, the agents also offered to help colonize Madagascar. On the 24th of June, the king accepted. He issued a letter of protection for the Madagascar pirates and appointed Caspar Morgan as his governor in Nosy Boraha. Morgan was to begin the colonization of Madagascar with the help of 12,000 Swedish troops. The pirates left for the French port of Saint-Malo. Here, they waited for a small Swedish party led by the king's secretary, Otto von Klinckofstrom. Passing through Denmark, Otto and his friends were under serious threat of being arrested, but succeeded in evading their captors. When they reached Saint-Malo, Morgan had equipped two frigates, ready to set sail for Madagascar on the 19th of March, 1719. In February, Otto and Morgan learned that Charles XII had died months earlier on the 30th of November 1718 while invading Norway. They may have tried to reach out to Minister von Gortz for financial backing, but the Count had been arrested by Charles's sister, Ulrika Eleonora, and executed on charges of embezzlement. Thus ended the ambitious adventure of the Nosy Boraha pirates at the Swedish court, and as they were embroiled in European power plays, other colleagues back home were leaving their mark on Malagasy politics. In 1693, the infamous pirate Thomas Tew resettled with his men in Nosy Boraha. Representing a letter of credentials from the English crown, presumably forged, he was received with high honours by the local young ruler, Queen Antivirata Rahina. In a bit of a plot twist, the pirate and the queen had an affair. Their passion bore a son called Ratsimalaho. According to some sources, Captain Tew barely got to know his son, as a Mughal musket shot neatly removed his bowels without anesthesia in 1695. But according to other versions, Captain Tew lived long enough to take care of his child's education, including, but not limited to, piratical skills. In both versions of this story, Ratsimalaho was sent to study in England or France for several years. While the Prince of Nosy Boraha was enjoying life as an exchange student, eastern Malagasy centres were attacked by a confederation of chiefs from southern Madagascar called the Tsikoa, or the Invincible. The fractured eastern clans needed a leader to unite them in the struggle, and the right man came along in 1712. He was, of course, Prince Ratsimalaho, the zany Malata. After returning to Nosy Boraha from his education abroad, the charismatic young man united the local chiefs under an alliance which later became a kingdom called Betsimisaraka, or the Indivisible Many. The prince's armies defeated the not-so-invincible ones, becoming the new eastern regional power. As such, the now king, Ratsimalaho, became the main trading partner for the French in Reunion and Mauritius, becoming their fine and trusted purveyor of slaves. In a twist of fate, the slave ships sent by the king to the French colonies were targeted by his own dad's colleagues, kicking off a new wave of intense raiding at sea, which, as usual, would be followed by another crackdown. In the early 1720s, both French and English navies resumed their war against Nosy Boraha. Early efforts were a total disaster. In 1722, the English East India Company sent 4 warships led by one Commodore Thomas Matthews to eradicate the piratical scum. When he arrived in sight of Nosy Boraha, Matthews realized 2 things. First, he had underestimated the pirates' firepower. Second, and more importantly, he had underestimated how rich they were. The sensible man that he was, Matthews decided to trade with the pirates instead of fighting them, selling rum and clothes in exchange for cattle and precious metals. Matthews completely ignored his mission and returned to India a very rich man. The French Navy proved to be more effective, capturing several pirate vessels in the Indian Ocean. Many pirate captains, though, evaded the blockade and relocated to western Madagascar. They sought protection from the Saklava kingdom, offering their services as naval advisors and living a life of luxury. This must have been extremely frustrating to the French, who in 1727 decided to hunt down the most notorious French corsair, Olivier de Vasseur, known as Le Bus. Captain L'Hermite of the French Navy captured Levasseur and took him to Reunion, where he was hanged in July 1730. Before dying, Le Bus hurled a piece of parchment into the air, shouting, "My treasure for he who can understand." That piece of parchment contained a cryptogram of 17 lines, allegedly indicating the location of his treasure, which could be anywhere between Nosy Boraha and the Seychelles. The treasure has not yet been found. As for the pirates left in Nosy Boraha, their epic was approaching the end. In 1750, King Ratsimalaho died, leaving part of his kingdom, including Nosy Boraha, to his daughter, Princess Bitty, or Betty. The princess married a French corporal in the same year, offering Nosy Boraha to France. This allowed the French to establish their first colonial foothold very close to mainland Madagascar and to get rid of the pirate menace once and for all. France would eventually control the entire African island in 1896. It is difficult to sympathize with the bulk of the pirates' business: slave trading, violent robberies, kidnappings, rape, murder. Nonetheless, it is impressive how a few bad men, total scum in their homeland, were able to wield so much power and influence for almost a century. They almost got a Nordic power to invade Madagascar. Moreover, Professor Jane Hooper at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia has argued that the presence of a few hundred pirates in a tiny island off of Madagascar led to the commercial and military buildup of European colonies in the southwestern corner of the Indian Ocean, considered thus far only as a service stop on the way to more profitable destinations in the Far East. Today, there may be only 30 semi-forgotten skeletons under the worn-out tombstones on Nosy Boraha, but those who owned the bones were able to shape the history of an entire region.